Our scripture for today comes from Numbers 21, verses 4 to 9, and I will be reading from the Common English Version. They marched from Mount Hor on the Red Sea road around the land of Edom. The people became impatient on the road. The people spoke against God and Moses. "Why did you bring us up from Egypt to kill us in the desert where there is no food or water? And we detest this miserable bread." So the Lord sent poisonous snakes among the people, and they bit the people. Many of the Israelites died. The people went to Moses and said, "We've sinned, for we spoke against the Lord and you. Pray to the Lord so that he will send the snakes away from us." So Moses prayed for the people. The Lord said to Moses, "Make a poisonous snake and place it on a pole. Whoever is bitten can look at it and live." Moses made a bronze snake and placed it on a pole. If a snake bit someone, that person could look at the bronze snake and live.
Thanks, Laura, for that reading. We're on a journey towards the cross, a journey towards the resurrection. We enjoy going on journeys, but not when we encounter snakes. I have not yet encountered a snake on a hike before, but I know others who have, and it is unsettling, even if the snake is not threatening. We have beautiful hiking trails in Alberta, and so during the summer is sort of the easiest time to travel, other years, of course, not this one, but it's also the best time to be here. So it sort of sets up a bit of a conundrum that way. Last summer I was able to do a few hikes, more than normal, and over the years I've accumulated some good hiking stories, and when you chat with other people about their hikes, they have stories too. It was earlier in the summer. I did a hike with a friend, and we went up a certain distance, but we encountered snow. We were going to go farther, but the snow was too deep, and we couldn't go as far as we wanted to. And it was interesting. We hiked up from this one particular point. There's a river. We hiked from there to the snow, and there was nobody else. Maybe they all knew the snow was there, but we hiked up all the way by ourselves and hiked back to the river and didn't see anybody. And so we're sitting there relaxing by the river, resting our feet a little bit, and then somebody else comes out of the path. Where's this person coming from? We didn't see them, and so there's already a little bit of suspicion. Is this person just more hardcore than we are? Or is this person stranger than we are? And depending on the answer, we may have to interact with this person differently. But he was an experienced hiker and had just kind of gone off a little bit on a side trail that we hadn't even seen. And we were talking too about cougars. There had been a cougar sighting somewhere around nearby, and so we asked if he'd ever seen one. And he said no, he'd been hiking for many, many years, had only ever seen a cougar a few times. And he said what a lot of people say about cougars, that if you see one, they're so stealthy and so clever that if you see one, there's probably something wrong. And so it was kind of part of another reminder, which we were already sort of having the same questions about him, that maybe there was something wrong, but it was a good conversation in the end about the dangers and the beauty of hiking. Of course, we go hiking for the scenery and for the exercise. We see beautiful mountainscapes. We see beautiful forests. Every now and then we encounter an animal. We go hiking for a lot of good reasons. And we go hiking with friends, with family, with people that we care about. And it's tricky to find somebody to go hiking with. Because if we go hiking with somebody who's way more experienced, way more athletic than us, then we're going to feel like maybe we're slowing them down. Or maybe they're going to be too harsh and push us beyond our limits. But on the flip side, we don't want to go with somebody who's so much slower than us that we're going to feel bad kind of being harsh towards them. We don't want to go in a situation where we're going to kind of test their limits, and in the testing of their limits, maybe reveal some of the tensions of that relationship. Because that happens. When we get tired, when we're walking for a long time, our filters go down. Right? The things that we normally do to demonstrate that we care, that we're paying attention, we stop doing those as much. And then in response, when someone else is being a little bit testy, then we sort of lose the patience to respond with the normal grace and compassion that we would if we were on level ground. And so there are other stories about hiking that you might not hear. Arguments that happened above the tree line. There are other interesting stories I've heard of walking along, hearing a fight, and then you get closer, and then the fight stops because you were there. Right? The forest doesn't hide the sounds of your argument. And so that's part of the embarrassment of being in a situation like that. It feels remote. It feels like you have privacy. But you don't. And I've talked to lots of couples that are healthy and happy together, but they can't hike together because it pushes that limit. It pushes them up against strains that normally aren't there, but reveal themselves when everybody's tired. Hiking can heighten the tension in a relationship. And so we have this story of the Israelites walking through the wilderness in a kind of almost like a hiking scenario. A pretty big chunk of our Bible is this story. The Israelites are walking through the wilderness for most of the book of Exodus, for most of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. This is the story. And we have people who are walking, and they're getting tired, and they're getting snippy is maybe a word we could use. Their filters are going down, and we have the story of a God who is helping them, a God who is protecting them, giving them food they didn't prepare, giving them water that they didn't have to look for, giving them shade that they desperately need, giving them light and guidance that they are also in need of. So when we read this story, we're sort of kind of stumbling upon another argument. We're kind of approaching this, observing an argument from the outside. And we are all curious creatures when we hear two people arguing. A part of us, the decent part of us, says, oh, let's back off, ignore, let's not pay any attention. Part of us wants to listen, right? And then pick which person we agree with. And there's kind of a danger there. We might get sucked into it and might start an argument with the people you're walking with. But we can't resist. And so in this story, we have that option too. We sort of know who we're supposed to side with. Of course, we know God's side of the story. It was God who saved the people from slavery. A God who overcame the powers in Egypt to overturn the system that they were enslaved to, who delivered them through the Red Sea where the soldiers were chasing them, who brought manna from heaven, who brought food, who brought all of the things that I mentioned before, God was doing this because God cared for the people of Israel, because God had made a promise to the people of Israel, because God was going to care for them, and because this was God's character. This is who God was. But if we take half a second, we can sympathize with the Israelites as well. They've been walking for a long time. That's really all they're doing in this story. They're tired of walking. We get that all the time. I've heard my own kids complain about walking because the hike was longer than they thought it was going to be. The Israelites didn't know how long they were supposed to be walking, so they get tired. We can understand that. They're bored. All of the things, the rituals that people find in their lives, rituals of employment, rituals of hobbies and travel, and things that we choose to build our lives around, they weren't able to do those things. They were just walking. And all of the things that they would do to entertain themselves, they couldn't do because they were in the wilderness. The longer they walked, the better their memories of Egypt were. They could remember the good food that they ate. They could remember the order and stability of the society. So all of that put together is going to make them more and more irritable. And we kind of live in a world where a lot of people are complaining. And inside, we understand, okay, it's better if we don't complain. It's better if we just go along with it. It's better if we just smile and nod, and pretty soon this will be over with. But a big part of us says, no, the situation sucks. We hate this. We don't want to follow these rules anymore. We don't want to wear the masks. We don't want to. We understand the people who are complaining. This is our story. Depending on the situation, you might be the person complaining. You might be the person being complained to. Either way, you get to understand this story. So maybe that's never been you, that you've had an argument on a hike or an argument in public. But the concern is, the embarrassment of that moment is that the person hasn't heard the whole story. They haven't heard all of the things that built up to it. And even though they might sympathize with you, they might see something in that argument that is a testament to your character. Right? You don't want them to think, I'm not normally a grumpy person, but I've been hiking for a long time, and they kept complaining about this thing, and I finally had enough. They didn't hear the rest of it. They just think, oh, this is a really irritable person. In the argument, they're going to make assumptions about your character. And so when we read this story too, we do the same thing. The Israelites have been receiving, and they've been doing nothing but complaining. The character of the Israelites is revealed in this story. Now, if we're looking at it from the outside, we might also have questions about God's character. On one of my hikes this year, I encountered 3 generations of men. Well, it's a bit of an exaggeration. The youngest was still a boy. And as we were hiking, I saw this family approach child, father, grandfather. And as they approached a little closer, I could hear the child was singing. And he was singing the song that never ends. If you know the song, then you know what I'm talking about. And the closer they got, he was still singing, and it was evident he had been singing for a while. It's like the title suggests, it is a song that never ends. You can sing it as long as you want. And I watched this family approach, and I was impressed by the character of the father and the grandfather. The kid kept on singing, and I thought to myself, that man really loves his son. Because if that was me, he would not still be singing that song. Maybe that's a testament to my character as a father, but this man seemed to have patience for his son. So in this story, the story of the snakes, an outsider or a person who's new to this story, or even a person who's just a little bit cynical now too, might say, what does this say about God's character? How much complaining would justify sending poisonous snakes among a group of people? What does this say about God's character? I was kind of wrestling through this question this week, and I started to think a little bit about apologies. In some ways, what God does in this story is apologize in a way. The people have complained. They are then they're being punished with these snakes that God has sent upon them. And then the people apologize first. And so then God relents and gives Moses a way to respond to the snake problem. But was it an overreaction? Were the snakes an overreaction, or was the complaining an overreaction? Depends on how you look at it. The people apologized. God sort of apologized by making the snake. We're sort of reading. I was reading that into the story. Apologies are a big deal for us as people, as human beings, and how we interact with each other. So there was a story this week of a news broadcaster who went to a high school girls basketball game. This is in the States. He went to the basketball game, and he was going to do a news report afterwards, maybe show some highlights. But he's there, and because he was on the news, he did a little thing at the beginning. He had his lapel mic on, and the recording part was done, and so he was under the impression that his mic was off. So he turned to watch the game, and his colleague was beside him. And as the game was about to start, they were going to do the national anthem. And some of the young women, there were white students and black students, and some of them took a knee during the national anthem. And this news reporter took objection to this. And he used some racist language in his explanation of his displeasure to his colleague. Ugly language. Disparaging of the girls who had taken a knee, and was just, it revealed something about his character. Now, this is a man with a public job. He's got to maintain a public image, and so that public image had been destroyed through these words. The words had been shared within the community, and so very soon after was an apology. And I'll read part of the apology because it was noteworthy. And as I'm reading it, as we all do when we hear an apology, then we get to assess the character of the person making the apology. So I won't read the name, but he says his name, I blank blank on the date, Thursday, March 11th. Most regrettably made some statements that cannot be taken back. Okay, so he's acknowledging what he's done. During the basketball game, I made inappropriate and racist comments believing that the microphone was off. However, let me state immediately this is no excuse for such comments should not have ever been uttered. And then he goes on to say, I'm a family man, I am married, I have 2 children, and at one time was a youth pastor. I continue to be a member of the Baptist Church. I have not only embarrassed and disappointed myself, I have embarrassed and disappointed my family and my friends. So, what are we seeing in this person's character? Humility. Immediate, quick. This person hasn't sat down with a PR organization. If anything, he's had a very quick conversation with a lawyer. But this is well-crafted, humble statements acknowledging wrongdoing, a commitment, and sort of not exactly stated, but it seems like there's a commitment to get better here. That's sort of, it's missing as a direct statement, but it's comprehensive acknowledgement of wrongdoing so far. 3 paragraphs of a good apology. Here's the 4th paragraph. I will state that I suffer type 1 diabetes, and during the game my sugar was spiking. While not excusing my remarks, it is not unusual when my sugar spikes that I become disoriented and often say things that are not appropriate as well as hurtful. I do not believe that I would make such horrible statements absent my sugar spiking. Now all of a sudden the comments about character have changed again, right? We see a comprehensive acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and then we see this. I know lots of people with diabetes, and sometimes they get tired when I wouldn't think a person would get tired. Sometimes they get short-tempered. It doesn't happen, it doesn't result in this, right? He also goes on to say a little bit later in the apology, I do not consider myself to be a racist. Now, that's a part of the question. All of us as human beings have the capacity to evaluate whether or not an apology is real or authentic. We have that with our friends on the schoolyard. We have that with people that we interact with business. We have that in all of our human relationships. This is a part of it. Apologizing, forgiving, acknowledging wrongdoing, moving forward. We're all experts at this point in our lives. But this statement, I do not consider myself to be a racist, is interesting in some ways because nobody does. Nobody says, yep, I'm a racist, I like people that look like me, and I hate people that don't. Nobody says that. But also, it's not a claim that we get to make ourselves. He doesn't get to say that. His opponents get to determine that. Right? I don't get to say if I'm a racist or not. People, ethnic minorities in my life, they get to have an opinion if I'm racist or not, based on my actions, based on my character. I don't get to, in some ways, I can say, well, here's the dictionary definition of what it means to be a feminist, and I ascribe to this, and this point, but the women in my life get to say if I'm a feminist or not. There's a story of a Mennonite farmer a long time ago. A person new to the area pulled into the driveway and said, hey, I've heard about you as Mennonites, but are you Christians? And he said, well, I could tell you, but maybe go ask my neighbor. We have this process of evaluating character. And when we apply that to God, it's fairly important that the conversation about character reveals a good character, and the story of the snake leaves room for doubt around that. So what's the way that we resolve that? So in the Gospel of John, the writer makes reference to this story. We all know, if you're a person who memorizes Bible verses, one of them is John 3:16, I'm sure. But John 3:14 says, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so must the human one be lifted up. So Jesus wasn't just lifted up, he was executed. He was crucified, put on the cross, but he was lifted up. In the Romans' eyes, he was lifted up as a way of saying, this is what happens to people who threaten the order of Roman society. He was lifted up as a warning to everybody else. If you want to cause problems in a Roman society, if you want to threaten the Roman government, this is what happens. We're going to lift you up and everybody can see. But God was working behind the scenes. God didn't control the Roman history of executions, but God used it for his benefit. See, the snakes at the beginning of the story in Numbers, they were snakes of bitterness. They were there as a result of the people of Israel being bitter. But the snake, the bronze snake that was hung on the pole, that was a snake of humility. It just took the people to recognize they had done something wrong, look to the snake, and they would experience healing. The people who looked at the snake were healed. Jesus was lifted up so that when we look at him, and when we look at the journey that Jesus went on to get there, then we are healed. We experience our healing because we recognize what happened to Jesus. Now, this is, of course, John chapter 3. Jesus hasn't died yet. But by the time people are reading this, of course, he had. And so they were in a position to learn that lesson. God so loved the world that he gave his only Son. God gave his Son and allowed his Son to be punished. In the same way that Moses made a snake and put it on the pole so that other people could see it, God gave his Son so that everybody could see him. So that whosoever believes in him won't perish, but have everlasting life. Jesus was lifted up as a demonstration of healing, as a demonstration of God's character. Because as a way of getting a deeper understanding of the snake story, we see in the story of Jesus that God isn't just sending punishment and then standing at a distance to watch the people suffer. God allows punishment to happen, but God steps in, takes the punishment onto himself so that we can see where the punishment is coming from and the character of the God who will take the punishment on himself for our benefit. The character of God is revealed on the cross. The character of God is not somebody who sends punishment, sends pain, sends suffering coldly, angrily, jealously. The character of God is someone who lovingly, compassionately takes that punishment onto himself. So when we look to the cross, we see that character. We receive that healing. But the story doesn't end there either. We experience that healing in ourselves, and we're also called to take pain and suffering onto ourselves for the benefit and for the healing of others. So as we journey towards the cross, as we experience that transformation in ourselves, my prayer is that we will be motivated to restore and to heal others. Amen.